This is the Guns Magazine podcast, episode number 97. Hi there, and welcome to the Guns Magazine podcast. I'm your host and the editor of Guns Magazine, Brent T. Thanks for joining us as we talk to the interesting people who make up the world of shooting, hunting, and the firearms industry. First, before we get started, let's talk about our great sponsors. 1791 Gun Leather is the presenting sponsor of the Guns Magazine podcast, and they'd like you to know their appreciation for the Second Amendment fuels their passion for gun leather and its representation of the original patriots of this great nation. 100% certified American steer hide joins 4 generations of professional leather artisans to create the perfect firearms holster. Carry your firearm with pride knowing that each 1791 gun leather holster is handcrafted to be the best holster for your firearm. See their full product lineup at 1791gunleather.com. The supporting sponsor of the Guns Magazine podcast is Hodgdon Powder. Available in granular powder and pellets, Hodgdon's family of 777 powders gives muzzle-loading enthusiasts a quick cleaning, low-odor black powder substitute for rifle and pistol applications. To learn more, visit Hodgdon.com. In today's episode, we talk to our friend Roy Huntington about the one gun everybody needs to own. I'll go ahead and let you in on the secret. We're talking about the .22 pistol. Whether you're shooting for fun, training, or varmint control, the .22 pistol is arguably the most versatile gun of them all. In this episode, Roy and I will talk about why. Now here's my talk with Roy Huntington. Well, good afternoon, Roy.
Howdy, sir.
How are things out your way?
Hot.
Hot. I know. It's
Yeah.
hot here. It's hot everywhere. Well, even though it's hot, this is still a great time to go to the range, and we were yakking earlier today, and we got on that topic that it always seems to happen when we're talking just about going out and shooting for fun and plinking, and we're talking about .22 pistols. And we were talking about the ones we like and the ones we want to get and some of the fun stuff we've done with it. So we thought, well, let's quit talking about it and let's record it and let's make that a podcast. So thanks for joining me for that so we can talk about .22. So let's just start off right now by, okay, what's your favorite in the stable? You've got a lot of guns and you got a lot of .22s, but talk about the ones you've been shooting in the last few days.
I think, you're right, because I think for me, it's got to be what's my favorite .22 this week.
Exactly.
Today, as a matter of fact, which I guess I shouldn't say because by the time this runs, it'll be yesterday. But
Yeah.
we posted a video on the Buckmark .22. It's one of their sport field models.
Yeah.
Only it's been Turnbullized. And so if people go to the FMG Publications YouTube channel, and they can see the video there, and that's definitely my favorite .22 this week. So it's a Browning Buckmark .22, but it's got that pretty color case hardening that Turnbull does. And it just, when I was shooting it, I thought, darn, this is fun.
Yeah.
It's just, it doesn't recoil and it's not real loud, and it shoots little tiny groups really easy, and it's got a great trigger, and it doesn't eat you out of house and home to shoot it. And I think that's what prompted me earlier when you and I were chatting, was when we said, well, let's talk about .22s because it's fun.
Well, that leads right into the question. I was sitting here thinking, so what is it that is so much fun about .22 pistols? Because I'm the same way. That when you think of fun shooting, I love all the other guns I've got, and I love shooting my .45 Colts and the .45 ACP and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what is it about the .22 that is just absolutely 100% pure fun?
I've actually thought a lot about this, and I've written a lot about it. And if I had to answer off the top of my head, I think it goes all the way back to the Grecian gods, and the
Okay.
and the reason for that is Zeus used to point his finger and smite at a distance with a lightning bolt.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And because we all remember growing up with cartoons, and there'd be Zeus up in a cloud pointing his finger down, lightning bolts would be smashing into the ground. Well, shooting a pistol to me is sort of a mini-me version of that. I mean, there's no other way that we can basically point our finger and smite at a distance. So with bigger guns, 45s, 9mm and stuff like that, there tends to be a lot of recoil and noise and expense and, and fuss.
Yeah.
But with a good 22 pistol, there's kind of none of that. In other words, you just like point your finger out there and you can smite at a distance. And it's just like you just thought about it. It's like, I'm going to smite that grasshopper over there, smite, and off it goes, So that's why I like them. And so, because you can have all that Greco-Roman god fun for a couple bucks, to shoot a little bit. I don't know if that's true or not, but why do you like to do it?
Well, it's equal parts practical, and I'm trying to think of the exact word I want to use, but the practical aspect is what you touched on of you can go out and shoot a lot for not a lot of money. Even today, we're kind of on the semi-tail end of the great ammo shortage, but there's not too many places where you can't find some reasonably priced 22, and it doesn't even have to be match quality, just some good old decent, big box store box 22 ammo. You get 500 rounds. It'll take you more than a day to shoot 500 rounds, and you can do that for not a whole lot of money. Certainly what the cost of one box of practice ammo for 9mm or 45 or whatever. And then the other aspect is, again, just the fun. There's no recoil. There's minimal noise. There's just enough to know you're shooting, a pistol. But you don't go home at the end of the day. You've burned 300 rounds and you're getting that little twinge in your hand that young shooters, as you get older, you will find that any pistol, if you shoot it enough, you start to get a little pain in the hand. And with a 22, that forestalls a lot. But it's just so much more fun because it's enough, but not too much, if that makes any sense.
You're right. I think part of that, we would jokingly point your finger and smite at a distance, but I also really like the fact that if you have a good quality 22, and we need to talk about that, but if you have a good quality 22, it really is, I would say, probably the best way to practice trigger press and sight picture.
Yep.
Just because of what you said, is you actually can concentrate on the trigger press and the sight picture, and you're not so distracted by recoil and muzzle blasts and picking up empty brass and hope you don't lose one in the grass. And that every time you pull the trigger, I just spent 35 cents. Those are sort of out of your mind. So you can really concentrate on doing that. Of course, they're great for introducing new shooters to guns and stuff like that. But I would like to talk for a minute, I think, about good quality 22s, because so often people go, that's just an old 22.
Yeah.
And they seem to just like, it's very disparaging kind of, why would you spend more than $100 on a 22 rifle? Well, because, there are some really excellent precision instruments that hide behind the label 22.
Yeah.
And, I've got a Walther Olympic free pistol. Now, it's a clone made in China, but it was made a while ago, and it's actually very high quality. I'm sorry, it's not made in China. It's made in Russia. And it's a really high quality, and it's got a crisp trigger, and it mirrors the performance of those Olympic free pistols that they use in the Olympics, and that should give you a hint. So this gun is very fun to shoot, and it really allows you to practice and really find out where your limits really are. Because if you're shooting some, I don't know, price point cast zinc, 22 semi-auto or something, well, you're never really going to know how good you are, because the gun's not going to shoot up to your ability.
Yep.
So I think spending the money is money well invested. And even then, it's not always as much as a high quality centerfire gun. Now, I will buffer that a little bit and say I've got a couple of Anschutz bolt action rifles, a 22 Magnum and a 22 long rifle, and I think people don't believe it when they shoot it, because these guns will shoot sub 1 inch groups at 100 yards with certain kinds of 22 ammo. And when they do that and they see the group appear in the spotting scope, they just stop and look at me and they stare with blank eyes, and because they're used to shooting grandpa's bent barrel pump action, rusty 22 that he kept behind the barn.
Behind the seat of the pickup truck in without a case. Yeah, we've all shot that one.
Not that those are bad guns, because they're not. And I have one that lives in my Easy Go, and it's probably, I would say that it's my number one most used gun that I own. It's a kind of semi-rusty, all blue worn synthetic stock Savage semi-auto 22, a clip-fed gun or magazine-fed gun. And it gets pretty much constant use around here. And it's exactly the kind of gun I'm talking about, which is an old beater. And I think it shoots, 3 inches at 25 yards on a good day. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But there are some raccoons out here who can't tell you anymore how badly it shoots.
Well, the distance thing I want to talk about in a minute, but let's go down our list, because I've got a couple that I really like, and then I'll turn it over to you, and then I'll go get coffee, because I'm sure you'll talk about your collection. But the first one, I think it's one of the coolest guns to come out in a while, at least from the fun side, and that's the Ruger Wrangler. We got to shoot it right before they came out with it, and I just absolutely fell in love with it. It's a great quality. It's Ruger quality, but yet the price point is sub $200. It comes in 3 different colors, and I know some of our guys, I think it was either Venturino or Tank Hoover, mixed and matched them. Put the silver barrel with the black grips and just put them all in a box and mixed them up, and turned out some really cool guns. But again, a very inexpensive, but yet it's a good quality cowboy gun. And I've yet to hand one to somebody that's not really an avid shooter, and they're like, "This is really, really cool." I said, "Yes, it is." So that's a big favorite. And then my other favorite right now is the TX22 from Taurus. I've had one for about 2 years now, and if you're training somebody with a Striker 9, this thing is a great way to, as you said, ramp them up without worrying about the recoil and saving some money. Because other than being a 22, it looks like a compact striker fired 9. And I've shot mine a lot. It runs great. They've now come out with an optic ready option, the competition model, I think they call it. So that is a great one. And then, of course, everybody's favorite, the Ruger Mark IV, which, as you've said, don't take it apart, because it comes apart real easy, but it don't go back together very easy.
That's the old ones. I will say the new one is just a push button, and it really works well.
Yeah.
I am so glad you said that about the Taurus, because I always tend to kind of forget that. Because I like a lot of classic old guns, and so Colt Woodsman and like these old Brownings and stuff like that. But boy, howdy, that Taurus is a shooter. And I remember, I think I was with you, maybe. We were at the SHOT Show when they first introduced it. We walked up to in the Taurus booth, and the engineers were there who developed it. And I remember I picked up the gun, I racked the slide, I tried the trigger, and I just went, holy cow. It was a crisp, really good quality trigger. And I remember the engineer was really proud. He said, basically we designed the trigger and then built the gun around it.
Yeah. Yep.
And I believe it. So
it feels like a good quality Striker 9. And, to work on different techniques and trigger pull and sight alignment and all that with my wife, she loves that thing. And she actually wanted to carry it. And I said, well, I'm not a huge fan of the 22 long rifle for carry, but I understand why, because it just makes everything so much easier, but yet you're still getting good quality practice without having to spend the money and worry about recoil. And for a smaller person, recoil, is a thing.
And people so do love these guns, and they do kind of tend to naturally think, well, I really like this gun. It's cheap to shoot. I hit well with it. And so why shouldn't I carry it, as a concealed carry gun? And I've experimented with that through the years. I think Walther had something called the TP22, I think they called it. or I can't, it was a really kind of high-end semi-auto 22. I can never get mine to run though. And Ivor Johnson came out with a kind of a clone of it a million years ago, and it actually worked really good. A lot of cops I knew had them as backup guns.
Wow.
But yeah, but in today's market, gosh, that remember Ruger came out with that LCP 22, I think they called it. And geez, that's a really fun gun. I got one. We made a video on it, and it's just you can't stop shooting it.
Yeah.
It's just so much fun. You just go, I want another one. I want to load another magazine. So
I was just sitting here thinking, and there's one that I cannot remember for the life of me. The first real handgun I ever fired was with a friend and his dad, and they had the old Harrington and Richardson 9-shot. Do you remember the model number on those?
Oddly enough, I think it was the 999.
That sounds right.
The model number. Yeah. Yep. I know exactly what you mean. That was the early days. High Standard had a double action 22 at the time, and also a 22 Magnum. But I think you just hit on something important, though, is that almost all of us cut our teeth on guns like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not many young people whose first shooting experience is with a 44 Magnum or a high capacity 9 or something like that. It's always some single shot 22 or something like that. I have a Wrangler from Savage, so it's their little Rascal. That's what it's called, Rascal. Yeah, it's a little single shot kind of miniature rifles made for little kids. Well, I had ordered one up when they first came out years ago, and after shooting it, I realized the typical Savage fashion shoots just like a laser beam, and it's just big enough that if you're an adult, you can still kind of hunker into it.
Yeah,
and it's got a little aperture sight, and I just fell in love with it. And I had them send me one with a yellow stock. They had, orange and yellow and blue and all kinds of different colors. Because my thought on that was that I would use this gun to introduce young people to shooting. And I like to be able to see them. It's like see the gun in their hand and see where it's pointing. And if you've got something that's a gray stock or a black stock or a brown stock, a lot of times if they're over across the field from you, you can't really tell what they're doing. Well, I guessed right, because this little yellow rifle is great, because when you get a little kid up to speed with it, and if we stroll around out in the pasture or something, it's so nice because at a glance, you can see exactly what they're doing with that gun.
Yeah. You always get back to 22 rifles because you love them so dearly, but I'm going to pull you back into 22 pistols. You showed me you had another Walther there that just looked really cool.
This is something to aspire to, by golly. And, I wanted one for years and years and years and years ago. I finally found, you might remember the old Shotgun News publication.
Sure.
Where we gun crank guys would get it and really drool over the import guns that they had, the surplus guns.
What do you mean import? Drool all over the guns. It was a good thing it was newsprint, because it absorbed the excessive saliva.
It's really true. It's barbaric, but it's kind of the case. Well, I saw somebody was bringing in Walther PPs. So that's like the famous Walther PPKS or PPK, in 380 and 32. So picture that gun. So the PP has a slightly longer barrel, a shorter grip, these are in 22 long rifle. And much to my surprise, they were actually police trade-in guns from Europe.
Wow.
I know. Well, in Europe at the time, especially, on the 30s, 40s, 50s, into the 60s, 22s, 32s, and 380 was considered a big bore, police gun. And so that's why I wasn't really surprised to see, that they finally traded them in, in the 80s. So I got this gun, and I have to say, it is just so darn much fun. It has the sort of retro Walther, James Bondy kind of thing going for it.
Yeah.
Except it has everything that we love about 22s. So no recoil. It's fun to shoot. It's certainly accurate, and it's inexpensive. And it's another gun, like you were talking about, Shirley. When I load this gun up and put it in the hands of a new shooter, and especially women, boy, their eyes just light up. They just love it so much. This particular gun is steel, so it's got a little heft to it, which just flattens recoil even more. I took the liberty though of doing a little sight work on it, so I absolutely dialed it in and zeroed it with CCI Mini Mag hollow points. So at 25 yards, beware if you're a sitting squirrel.
Yeah, a friend of mine has trying to think what it is. It's suppressed, and he brought it to the range, and Mr. Ground Squirrel was running around the firing line in a provocative fashion, and that was the best pistol shot I've ever made. 50 yards, and I center punched him, and I did that not because of bloodlust. He was damaging the grass in the area, so I was trying to be responsible and take care of, the range and all that stuff, but I was so proud of that. I might have even done a trophy shot with it.
Actually, you just sort of accidentally segued into something that I think is, no, I think I said it in this video with the Turnbull gun, is the only thing more fun than shooting an accurate 22 pistol is shooting an accurate 22 pistol with a suppressor on it.
Yeah, that's big fun.
Lord, I have to tell everybody, if you're listening to this and you have never tried that, do not pass go. Do not collect $200. See about getting yourself a suppressor while we still can, at least. Yeah, it costs you a couple $100 to do the transfer, but it's actually easy to do. You go into any gun store that sells them. They'll walk you through the process. It's very simple. But when you shoot it, it's so strange because, like you say, you don't hear the gun.
Yeah.
If it's a really good suppressor, you mostly just hear sort of the clack of the action of the pistol running.
Mm-hmm.
But I love handing a suppressed gun to somebody who's a new shooter, especially, or who have never been around it, because I always let them shoot it a few times, right? And then you screw the suppressor on, and then I say, go ahead and take your earmuffs off. And they look at you like, oh, no, I'm not supposed, I say, no, it's okay. Go ahead, do that. And then they pull the trigger, and they all have the same look. They look at you and their jaw drops open and they go, did it shoot? Is it okay?
Yeah.
Is there something wrong? It's like, no, it's something right.
What's that term? Like a cow looking at a new farm gate. What?
What the hell? Okay. We both loved them dearly. I think our very first sort of podcast kind of a Facebook Live thing. We actually talked about the Wrangler when it first came out.
You got a better memory than I do.
I have since taken the time to redo mine. I rebuilt it, and I chamfered the muzzle correctly, and recut the forcing cone. Did an action job on it, and I took the time to zero the sights because they're fixed sights. And mine was shooting just a little bit to one side, so I adjusted the windage by opening up the rear fixed sight in my milling machine. And so basically I got this gun all dialed in. Well, it went from, like, I would say about 3 inches to 3¼ inches at 25 yards. That was about what it could shoot. And I think it was a combination of a little bit of a gritty trigger and just the general, construction of the gun. It is made to a price point. We have to be honest about it, but it's actually fine. It was perfectly reliable. Well, now the darn thing shoots about 1 inch or 1¼ inch.
Yeah.
And I think, yes, on one hand, it's silly. Do I put that much time and effort in, as you say, a gun that costs less than $200? But on the other side, was an interesting process. I enjoy doing it.
Yeah, and that's a good point that I hadn't even thought of, that if you're going to do some gun work, you want to try your hand at revolver action jobs and things like that, better to do it on a sub $200 gun than a $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $1,500 gun.
Well, I have heard, but I haven't proven this yet myself, that the action parts on a Ruger Wrangler are exactly the same as the action parts on a Ruger 22, like a single six or a super single six.
Mm-hmm.
And they're exactly the same. They should drop in. The only difference is the ones in the Wrangler are MIM parts. Right. They have to, of course, to keep them more affordable. I noticed my parts seem fine. They fit well. They polished up, nicely. But I'm going to go ahead and see if I can find a parts kit with, from like a single six or something like that, just out of curiosity, to see if they fit in.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know any reason to do that, because if you have a single six, just shoot that gun.
Yeah.
But
well, again, you can practice on the Wrangler and then tackle your single six.
Yeah. Oh, that's actually a very good point. Yeah. Dial in this gun. I have my very first pistol is a Ruger Super Single 6.22. I got it when I was 17, courtesy of my mom. Thanks, Mom. She was of course, old enough to buy it in those days, and it was $66 at the Navy Exchange on the 32nd Street Naval Base. Boy, remember those days? Yeah.
Wow.
I know. And we used to shop there pretty regularly, and I about wore that poor guy out behind the counter, because every time we went there, I had to, could you get that gun out? I'd like to look at it again. And then finally one day when I walked up with my mom at my elbow and I said, sold, he rolled his eyes. He said, finally. He said, this is the hardest $60 I've ever earned. Yeah. Well, I still dig this gun out and shoot it all the time. And it's just as fun now after, I don't know, 3.5 million rounds through it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, we've got to make a mental note for a future podcast episode of I did the exact same thing before I was even old enough to buy guns. That was back in the day where every hardware store still sold guns. So you'd go and can I see that? And they roll their eyes. Like, okay. And you'd look at it and okay, here you go. Because they knew you couldn't afford it and it wasn't legal to sell it to you anyway at that point, post 1968. But you were over there every day and you'd take a couple of buddies and you'd stand there and talk about what you would do when you bought it and how you would, change it up and modify it. And it's so funny because I think anybody that's an avid shooter of our age or older did the exact same thing.
Well, if I go back to 1964, I was living in Australia with my parents. My dad was assigned to the embassy then. And I, of course, I have just had a terrible hankering for a .22 rifle. And I had worn out the Gun Digest for the last couple of years, looking at the catalog section. Of course, no internet or anything, know. And I knew the specifications and price and everything you could imagine of every single, .22 rifle in the book. And then come Christmas morning in '64, there was the long box in the corner behind the tree, right? So
and angels sang and golden light shone down.
Golden light showed in the living room, and we actually have it on kind of jerky 8mm. I've been meaning to put it in my insider column, and I will one of these days. But I opened that box up, and that was my first, single shot .22 rifle. But the funny thing about it was that my grandparents, and since the statute of limitation is over now, and they passed away a million years ago, my grandparents had actually mailed that to Australia.
Wow.
in U.S. mail. Maybe you were allowed to do it in those days. I don't know. But they mailed it along with 4 or 5 boxes of ammunition, and then there you go. And that's how that arrived there. And my dad told me it was $17. That's how much that rifle costs. Yeah, because he said it was a bit of a big decision for them, since they were retired at the time. But I remember opening the box, and as I dumped the rifle out, loose .22 bullets fell out. and my dad started to laugh as he said, well, they mailed them with the bullets and they've ridden all the way in the mail,
Oh my gosh.
I know. Those were the simple, maybe arguably better old days, I think.
Absolutely. At least I would vote for it. So in closing, and we weren't... Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say before we close, if you do have a .22, and if you haven't done this yet, you seriously think about investing on this. There's such a broad range of .22 plinking targets out there nowadays, and a simple dueling tree, they call it, which is like a vertical post, and it's got little round plates, usually about 6. And so what you do is you start with 3 on your side and 3 on the other side, and then you and your buddies try to shoot the round plates so they flip over to the other guy's side. And so whoever ends up with all 6 plates on their own side is the loser. And I have to tell you, there's some fast and furious, trigger time occurs.
Yeah.
And and some name calling and finger pointing, as it were. But there's a lot of synthetic targets. We've tested a few. Tom McHale did a nice video on one that are really safe to shoot. You can shoot them like literally almost at muzzle contact. And those are fun. When I was a kid, we used to shoot at Necco wafers and the candies, and then Oreo cookies, stuff like that. And what's nice about that is that you don't have to clean up the mess because it's biodegradable.
Exactly. The polymer targets we're talking about are Throom targets, because it's funny, great minds think alike. This is exactly where I was going to take the conversation, and as usual, you beat me to it. But yeah, those polymer targets are Throom, and THROOM. And they are cool. They are fun. They've got knockdowns. They've got plates, and they even make a really cool bracket that you slip 2x4s into to build your rack to support all these different targets. And still, it's all polymer, so that if you bust it with something, you're not going to have a round coming back at you or ricocheting someplace it shouldn't. So I'm a big fan of those. Tom turned me on to them. They are great things, and there's been polymer targets around for a long time. These seem to have solved all the various and sundry problems. I have not taken them out when it's 20 below zero here, but it seems like they would survive just fine. And then the other target that I always liked was clay pigeons. A box of clay pigeons gives you a great reactive target. And I would always take a clay pigeon, put a tablespoon or two of flour or chalk in the middle, and then some Elmer's glue, and glue them together with a string, and then you could hang them off your target stand, and you get a nice big puff of smoke even with a 22. Now, I will say, if you hit it right through the dead center, it tends to just pop right through, but especially if you hit toward the rim of it, you get a nice big smoke cloud.
We do like to blow things up, even if it's not really blowing it up. It just looks like it's blowing it up. You're right about that. I'm going to make a video too, because a reader sent me this really cool target, and basically picture a target stand out there with some lightweight plywood on it. And what he's done is he's rigged a V-shaped channel, like two 2x4s that narrow down at the bottom, and that's a simplified way of explaining. But what he did was he loaded up this V shape with clay birds, and then he figured out this little way at the bottom. And I have to look at it closer, but basically there's one presented at the very bottom, and so what you do is you shoot the bottom one, and then it pops, and then it automatically feeds another one right into the same spot. And it's really cool. So I'll sort that out. We'll make a video, and then everyone can learn how to do it.
Excellent. Well, now all this talk of 22s and fun and plinking, and now I've got the bug, even though it's hot enough to fry an egg on the sidewalk here right now. Still, I'll wait till the sun goes down a little bit, and then I think I may head out to the range and turn some cartridges into noise.
I think that's a great idea. So, well, I appreciate this. It was a lot of fun. I always like to talk about 22s. I hope everybody listening enjoyed it. And, if they think about it, maybe send editor@gunsmagazine.com your own story about your own first 22 rifle. I think we'd all love to hear some of those.
That's a great idea. So that duly noted. If you've got a great story you want to tell, try to keep it to, 10 paragraphs or less, but send it to me at editor@gunsmagazine.com, and I would be interested to pick a few of the best ones, and we'll have Roy format them, and maybe we'll see a story like that soon. Well, Roy, thank you so very much for joining us, and we're going to get out there and go shooting one of these days.
All righty, Brent. Look forward to having you guys come visit us soon.
I hope you enjoyed our chat about the 22 pistol, and if you don't already have one, hopefully you're thinking about going shopping. Let us know if you do. And with that, we hope you're enjoying the Guns Magazine podcast. Guns Magazine was first in the business, and we're bringing you the most interesting chats in the gun world. If you've got questions or comments about the show, please email me. That's editor@gunsmagazine.com. Make sure you subscribe to us on your favorite podcast directory, YouTube, and of course at gunsmagazine.com. And while you're online, don't forget to check out our great sister publications, American Handgunner Magazine at AmericanHandgunner.com and AmericanCop.com. We'd also appreciate it if you'd share a favorite episode or some kind words on your own social media. And don't forget to check out the presenting sponsor of the Guns Magazine podcast, 1791 Gun Leather. Visit them at 1791gunleather.com. That's it for this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. For the entire staff at FMG Publications, I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent Wheat. Now get out there and get shooting.